Interview started, 1300 hours. First of all, I would like to set the record straight about one or two of the facts that one or two of my viewers are not entirely clear on. Firstly, you will see that I am correct in my statement that I made in my previous video about the 3 Roman dodecahedrons that have been found on the edge of the Roman Empire in the north-east of England, close to Hadrian's Wall. So here is the Corbridge dodecahedron. I have just spoken to the museum curator and she tells me that there is nothing really known about the history of the Corbridge dodecahedron and that it is a complete mystery. No one can say where it was found in Corbridge or even when it was found. It has always been classified as part of the Corbridge Small Finds collection for as long as anyone can remember. Inside this exhibit case, 2 other additional dodecahedra were also on display that were also found along the eastern march of Hadrian's Wall. These have now been returned to the Museum of the North in Newcastle. Here is a map of northern England showing Hadrian's Wall, and you can clearly see marked on the map here the 3 Roman dodecahedrons found at Corbridge, South Shields 1 and South Shields 2. Here is an academical paper written by Bernhard Greiner in Vienna about 1995 called the Romische Dodekaeder, which, as you can see, is all in German. I am presently in the process of having this report translated by a professional translator. I was able to obtain the PDF copy from Bielefeld University in Germany, which I will leave a link in the description below. First of all, here is the Corbridge dodecahedron, number 61, that I showed you in close-up on our visit to the edge of the empire in my previous video. The South Shields 1 was found in the Roman fort of Arbia, which is in South Shields, as you would expect, Town and Weir in England. It was found in 1923. Number 69, which is referred to as South Shields 1, was found in 1923 at the Roman fort of Arbia, which is situated adjacent to Hadrian's Wall near Newcastle. Number 70, which is referred to as South Shields 2, was found at Pons Aelius, which is another Roman fort in Newcastle adjacent to Hadrian's Wall. This was found in 1990. Secondly, a small number of viewers have suggested that you don't need a Roman dodecahedron to send a coded message. You just need to stick the wooden code wheel peg into the wax seal to tell the receiver which code wheel you need to use to decode the message. I thought some experimental archaeology would be interesting to demonstrate this point. First of all, the message is inserted into the wooden cartridge. Now, the hot molten wax is poured into the sealing area. The wax is allowed to cool and solidify. You can see it was pretty much translucent before, and now it's starting to become more opaque as the wax is starting to cool. As you can see, the wooden code wheel's peg is pressed into the solidifying wax, as our commentators have suggested. As we all know, wood is an organic material, and unfortunately the wax in contact with the wood has bonded to it, removing it from the seal. The resulting hole in the wax is now unfortunately unhelpful to the message decoder in determining which code wheel to use to decode our message. Using the bronze Roman dodecahedron to form an impression in the wax gives us a nice, clean, repeatable imprint in the wax to enable the receiver of the message to make an accurate decision in which code wheel to use to decode our message. Next, after our expedition to the edge of the empire, some people are suggesting that I've placed too much emphasis on the link between the Roman military and the use of the Roman dodecahedron as a coding device. I'm afraid it's just a fact that much of the evidence we've obtained so far has turned up in locations where there was activity, occupation of contentious territories, and conflict. As I suggested to you in the concluding Q&A section of my first YouTube video, you will be familiar with the idea that one of the Roman Empire's greatest talents centred in adopting the ideas, inventions and religions of the other nations and then adapting them to their needs. Why were some found with coins or treasure, and why were some found in temples and graves? It's unlikely that the dodecahedron coding system was invented by the military, but more likely a mathematician, a scientist or an engineer, and not necessarily from within the Roman Empire itself. The inventors would want to sell the system to anyone who could pay for it, and this would include business people, merchants, the aristocracy and even the religious fraternity, all who would have had the requirement to send secure messages around their networks, groups or organisations. Perhaps you can imagine priests coding and decoding messages as a service to the public, for donations or sacrifices. Interview suspended at 13:08 hours. I'm glad that's all over with now. Now we can turn our attention to something new and amazing that I have discovered about the Vindolanda Disk that I suggested was intended to be used as a code wheel with the Roman dodecahedron to produce coded messages in the ancient Roman world. Here is the Vindolanda Disk, or what remains of the Vindolanda Disk that I took you to see in our last video. Looking at it a little closer, you can see 4 very small holes in the wood, which I had initially thought could have been made by a wood-boring insect, but on closer inspection you can perhaps see that they have been either drilled with a small pin drill type implement, or maybe they are impressions made by very small nails or something very sharp. As mentioned previously, you can see the exact article in the Vindolanda Charitable Trust collection in their online website. Item number W 1986-109. I will give you the link to this in the notes below. Here is a print of our item taken at twice full size. Here I am using a pair of compasses to measure the distance between the centres of the 2 pilot holes in the wooden artefact. I make this distance to be 44mm, but you can check it for yourself if you wish. Next, remembering my Euclid from my school homework, I construct a regular pentagon using a 44mm baseline. I place the pentagon with the 44mm sides onto the light box. Onto this we place our print of our wooden artefact. We position our wooden artefact print with the two pilot holes over the baseline of the pentagon so that the hole centres line up with the two bottom points of the pentagon. Now, here's the magic. A straight line can be drawn through the left pilot hole and the right pinhole to intersect the top right point of the pentagon. A happy coincidence, you might say. Now, a straight line is drawn through the central pinhole and one of the left pinholes to intersect the top left point of the pentagon. And you might say, wow, that's interesting, that's no coincidence. And now we draw a straight line using the bisecting line that we used to construct our 44mm pentagon and the central pinhole to intersect with the top point of our pentagon. And now you might start to ask yourself, what the hell is going on? I know I did. Having completed our Euclidean geometry homework, we can now establish the true centre of what was the Vindolanda Disk, and we can establish its original geometry. You can see after being buried in the Northumbrian ground for some 1800 years that the wood has shrunk around the 8 to 9 o'clock position and expanded around the 4 to 7 o'clock positions. As you can see, these two forces have distorted what is remaining of the central 9mm hole. For anyone who is interested, it would be great if you could repeat the process which I've used here and check the findings on something like Omni, for example, which is an online Pentagon calculator. I will leave a link to this in the notes below. As you can see, the measurements A equals 44, little r equals 30 and big R equals 37 millimeters. These compare favourably with the results obtained on Omni. The three key parameters that we are interested in are A, which is the side, little r, which is the incircle radius, and big R, which is the circumcircle radius. Well, as you saw, there were no Hollywood special effects. There was no smoke. There were no mirrors. Just a paper copy of the original artifact itself, another piece of paper with the pentagon accurately drawn on it, a pencil, a pen, a pair of compasses and a ruler. As you would expect, I'm sure that you can appreciate that it would be completely wrong and dishonest of me to distort or tamper with the evidence in any way to prove my theory. The evidence is locked away in a museum case where no one can touch it. As soon as people start to distort or tamper with the evidence itself for whatever reason, then I'm sure you will agree with me that serious harm is done to the scientific method. All this is clearly no coincidence. All I can say that there is something in the geometry of this ancient object that is fundamentally pentagonal. Someone who knew exactly what he was doing made these marks in the wood for a purpose about 1800 years ago. Whatever he used to make the marks, I think his purpose was to accurately mark out the wooden disc with the pentagon so that 5 holes could be bored into it for some purpose. What could that purpose be? Why would the maker particularly choose 5 holes? Why were 5 holes required that 4 or 6 holes wouldn't satisfy? It would have been very easy to mark out and bore the 4 holes in a circle, as the holes are 90 degrees apart from one another. Also, it would have been very easy to mark out and bore 6 holes in the circle using the circle radius method. But why would the maker particularly choose 5 holes? Why were 5 holes required that 4 or 6 holes wouldn't satisfy? I think that the 5 holes were required to fit the dodecahedron. We cannot say with any certainty if there were markings on the other half of the disc, but maybe they helped to position the 2 pilot holes that we see today in the remains of the Vindolanda Disk. When I discovered the relationship between this ancient piece of wood and my theory, I didn't expect where this would take me next. Are there markings on the other side of the wooden artifact? You may well ask. The truth is, we don't know. Presently, there's no photographs of the reverse side of the disc. I have approached the curator of the Vindolanda Trust, who has very kindly offered to take some photographs of the reverse side of the disc in January 2025, when the museum case is next open for cleaning. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all my subscribers and contributors to my channel for their inputs and ideas, including those of you who disagree and challenge my theory, because without this my stream of ideas would come to a halt. So thank you. Before I conclude with a little disclosure about my next video, in relation to a future video I am thinking of producing for you, I would like to ask you all a question. You will be familiar with the scutum Romano, which was carried into every territory that the Romans conquered. My question I have for you is this. Roughly, how many scutum Romano shields do you think were made during the history of the Roman Empire? I am taking the history of the Roman Empire to stretch from 510 BC to 476 AD. So your answers to this would be really useful. Thank you. Please can I ask you, if you are enjoying my content, it would be great if you could consider subscribing to my channel so that you will be alerted to my next video where I will expand on my theory with some more evidence that I've discovered that takes us in a totally different direction on why the Roman dodecahedrons have been found in the northwestern territories and none have been found around the Mediterranean coastal countries. Bye for now. Are you not entertained?